Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Gracious Hope Podcast. I am Pastor Red, and today's edition or episode of our podcast is a leadership conversation that has weight, but it also carries hope. Our country, Liberia, is a nation with scars, but also a nation with calling. It is a place where leadership is not just a title. Leadership is a responsibility that touches the hungry, the grieving, the young, the overlooked, and the future. The kind of leadership we need in our country is not all about smart, but leadership with wisdom. It must be clean, it must be courageous, it must be compassionate. My special guest today on today's podcast is a man many recognize as a pastor, a public theologian, a mentor, and a builder. Reverend Dr. Samuel B. Reeves Jr. has led Providence Baptist Church in Monrovia to become one of the most socially, spiritually, and publicly engaged congregations in our country, Liberia. His ministry has helped feed the homeless, strengthen education, support business owners, and push national conversations on peace, reconciliation, and moral leadership. Now, this podcast today is not about hype, it is about substance. It is about how a life anchored in Christ Jesus can serve a nation in real time. Dr. Reeves would like to say, welcome to the Gracious Hope Podcast today.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. It's a
Good.
good thing to
Yes,
be
yes,
here
I'm
with you.
grateful. Yes, I'm grateful that you're here today. I appreciate you making the time, and I want to begin with your story because the way God forms a leader always matters. And so, um, Dr. Reeves, when you returned to Liberia after the Civil War to pastor Providence, the historic Providence Baptist Church, what inner convictions and experiences shape your decision to leave a comfortable ministry in the United States for a nation real and true recovery?
Thank you very much. That's a loaded question. So let me see if I got some loaded answers for sure. Man, that the call to come back here was no small call, but when God, makes His call plain, He provides. Like we sometimes we say, if He gives you the vision, He provides the provision. But it was a difficult call, but soon it became so clearing that the Lord made a way, and then I got gung ho with the purpose for which He was calling me, to the extent that I had to stop and say to understand the full call, because it was just not a call on my life personally, but it was a call on my family's life. So putting all of that in perspective, and back in context, then I had to stop and listen anew to what the Lord was saying. But coming back, getting back here, and starting to do the things that He had called me to do. I like to say it kind of this way. I began by reshaping the theology of the call before shaping the programs that the call needed to put into action. Because again, our behavior are shaped by our beliefs. The things we believe drives how we live. So if we are going to preach the gospel, then we had to begin to live the gospel, and do it in practical public ways. Then we had to move the church from just being a church in old historic relic into um, the streets by listening to people's needs of where they are and the time, again, the context. Um, the time that I came back, Providence is sitting on Broad Center and Ashmont Streets, coming out of the civil crisis. I've done some good things in the process of all of that, but in this time also finds itself in a completely different uh, context and environment. So uh, with hungry people around, you had to feed them. With injustice spoken loud, you had to answer with truth and courage. So over time, the church discovered that public witness is not political noise, but
Hmm.
faithful
Yes.
presence. So the church had to be faithful and had to have a presence, meet people where they were at the time, uh, irrespective of even the church's own limitation in resources, financial, human resources, and other things. The church still had to discover that its public witness was not political noise, but faithful presence.
Mhm. Wow. And that's his courage because some people talk about sacrifice, but you walked into that sacrifice. Was there a moment when it became clear to you that this was not simply a career move, but a calling you could not ignore?
So it takes me back to my days in Grand Rapids. I basically, I mean, without being sounding flippant and the old cliche, I believe the Lord actually said it was time to get out of Grand Rapids. I've done my task there. I pastored a church there for about 9 years. Got there, the church was about 800 members. In about 9 years, the church had grew to 4,000 members.
Hmm.
Um, and that was just exactly the time that God has said it's time to get up and go back to come back to Liberia. And I was like, what? But and it was so clear that I was at the church in Grand Rapids, and I would see when we did our PowerPoint presentations of the worship, I would see things happening in Liberia on that screen. That's how so consuming I was of what God was saying. Um, that that it even caused friction with my family.
Mhm.
That I got so gung ho that I ran ahead of myself and forgot that there was not just a call on my life as an individual, but was a call on my family's life, and plus the other
Hmm.
tributaries that are tied to it. But soon we realized that I need to come back to center again. Like I like to talk about Nehemiah, I had to come back and make sure God is this just not a career move or change a location, but it was a calling. And when I realized I got that straight, the other things followed.
It was a calling. And when you landed back home, you saw the reality on the ground. What do you have to adjust in your expectations about ministry and leadership?
I'm glad that I realized it was a calling that I not just, like I said, not just realized, but I knew for a fact that it was a calling. I've been convinced because my first 6 months, I think maybe less than 6 months, because I'm a night person, I up late and
Mhm.
my house got broken into by thieves, and I walked in the room and met this completely strange person that had you thought if you had seen my house or the rooms that they went through, like a hurricane had gone through it. I mean, the war years. You think about the war years in Liberia, how the streets look when the war passed by your particular location. And I stood there, and this guy looked at me, and I froze. If he had a machete, he could have killed me. I had my muscles would do nothing. My mouth would not scream, rogue, like we say in Liberia.
Mhm.
I just stood there, and this guy looked at me, and he jumped through the window and went out. And then I flapped on the floor, and I started to doubt, why was I here? I better get up from here and go back. My wife and son, were still back in Grand Rapids, Michigan. What am I doing here?
Mm.
So I'm glad that I realized up front before I left that this was God's call and not just a career move. So soon I got to move back to the center to realize the purpose for why I had come back. So that kept me. If I did not have that sense of calling, I tell you the truth, the next week or two, I will pack
Mhm.
my bags because the church that I left didn't want me to leave. So I would just go back and say, look, sorry, I made a mistake. I'm coming back. They were taking me in for sure. But I knew that there was a call, and that was part of the challenge of the call that I faced faced that
Mhm.
night.
Yeah.
So those are the things that basically that's the one thing that prepared me to stay, and I've been here for 21 years now.
Okay, and let's talk about shaping the Historic Providence Baptist Church into public witness. Now, you have led Providence Baptist Church to become one of the most socially, spiritually, and politically conscious congregations in Liberia. How did you practically guide the church into that kind of a public witness and community engagement?
Well, one when I got back, I had to understand how I was gone for a number of years. Uh, I had to come back and understand the context of where I was. Even though I was born here, but I was gone for a good while. I had to learn the community, the environment, both the political, social, psychological, and all of that, even the theological context, because the war has also reshaped some of that as well. So I had to just get the church um, to realize who it was, why it was, and where it was. You know, who this is the Historic Providence Baptist Church that has shaped a nation, that has had birth a nation. I think one of the only places, if not the only place, where a church gave birth to a nation, the cornerstone of the nation. Why were we here? So we had to go back and redefine our vision and our mission, and
Mhm.
realize that uh, we're a church that God had called to be disciples, making disciples, transforming lives, and renewing communities. Uh, uh, Disciples making disciples, you know. And then where are we? We're in Liberia in this time and context, and the needs that's around where we were. All of that put together, the Lord used to help us as
Mhm.
we help the congregation realize those three questions. We went refine our vision. We're building a church where lives are radically changed and disciples are intentionally made. We said we're going to do it through 5 Gs: uh, growth, groups, small groups, good stewardship, and the others. And so those things, when we got to realize who, why, and where, it began to shape the ministries that have come out of our experiences over these 21 years, really.
Hmm. And some pastors in our country are afraid of public witness because they think it will become partisan. Now, others avoid it because it is hard work. How do you teach your people, your congregation, to engage socially and also into the society without losing the essence of the gospel of Christ?
Again, go back to the. We had to go back to the beginning. Go back to the scriptures. The
Oh
needs.
no, my question was, some pastors they are afraid of public witness because they think it will become partisan, and
Right.
others avoid it totally because it is hard work, to navigate between being a public witness that is talking about issues in society when it comes to justice, when it comes to fairness, when it comes to compassion, kind other things, speaking the truth,
Mhm.
and others avoid it because it is hard work. They don't know how to navigate in between. But then, how did you? Because you are known for speaking out the truth. When you are known for speaking out when there is weak leadership, and you are known for speaking out to encourage good leadership, so that the entire populace will benefit in every way
Right.
when it comes to dispensing resources and all of that. So the question is, how do you teach your people to engage socially without losing identity of the gospel?
I think I always say we're called to a holistic gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So how public policy shapes who we are, the gospel has something to say about it. Issue of education, the issue of food, whatever the issues are.
Mm-hmm.
What the church is called to do is to address all of it. And so sometimes we tend to compartmentalize the gospel. We think some things are spiritual and some things aren't. And I think that just follows it. Everything that happens is spiritual. That's we are called to make sure the gospel address all of it. And if and when as ministers of the gospel we realize it, then we ought not to be afraid. But I think sometimes we are partisan by not doing those things. And I think we don't want to be partisan. So we say, I will not talk about the fact that people don't get paid for 2 months after the work. But come on, that's a justice issue. And talks about let justice roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. How can you not preach that when government has certain policies in place that does not really address the needs of the people? The Bible has something to say about that. So sometimes we shortchange ourselves as ministers of the gospel because we either don't fully understand what the gospel is calling us to do, or we want to be partisan by calling it being nonpartisan. So we say, I will engage government. No. I mean, you have to just preach the gospel. And when you preach the gospel
Mm-hmm.
addresses all of those issues. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if someone will
So
ask
that's
you,
what we've done.
sure. If someone will ask you right now, we're listening about some of the practical steps you took to move the church services to the community. That is not just on a Sunday or weekly in the church, but to move the church from there, what has been taught and learned from there to the presence of the community without burning out the church.
Right. So you realize your community, you realize the needs that exist there. Then you also realize what God has given you in your particular congregation. I believe every congregation, any those who come in to be part of your congregation, God has sent them there with the requisite gifts and abilities, resources to do the ministry that He's called and inspire you and vision you to do. So you must now get those people in tools, give them a vision
Mm-hmm.
to rally around so that they see that the reasons why they're there, they're not spectators, they're not there to consume consumers, because sometimes most of our churches, if we're not careful, that's what happens, but they're there to provide service, spiritual service that includes everything on the list, from taking care of people's needs,
Mm-hmm.
physically, spiritually, mentally, psychologically, and you name it.
Hmm. And under your leadership, Providence Baptist Church has fed hundreds of homeless men, women, and children and developed ministries for the poor and vulnerable. What leadership principles sustain you in building and maintaining such compassion driven outreach?
Awesome. Compassion must be a structure or it will fade. So compassion, the first thing is has to be you have to have compassion for the people that in an environment with
Mm-hmm.
context where you find yourself. You have to. So you must have a structure that's based on compassion. So we build systems that allow generosity to outlive our enthusiasm. Because you can be happy about it, but you got to be that compassion must be seen in how
Mm-hmm.
generous you are in terms of helping to meet people's needs and providing the right kind of ministry. So I learned to empower teams again because I don't have it all. I don't know it all. It doesn't matter what kind of school I went to. I still don't have what all it requires to provide for those communities. So so I also learned to empower teams, not heroes,
Mm-hmm.
uh, to be and to measure the faithfulness and not the applause.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see, when you go there, you happy. They'll measure the applause, but the applause only goes for a while and it fades. If you empower teams and not heroes. People build on the shortcomings of others. If you just empower heroes, then John Brown thinks he knows it all, and he try to do it all by himself, and soon he fails. Just like sometimes your applaud with will fail or fade. So when resources were scarce,
Hmm.
we trusted God, but we also planned wisely. So you did both. You did both. And then love became sustained when it was shared. So, those two things got work together all the time.
Yeah, yeah, and reaching out to the community, feeding people is not just a program; it is commitment.
Right.
What do you do to keep compassion from becoming occasional and to make it part of the culture of your church?
It had to be part of the structure, part of the system that we're building around what we were planning to do. So it had to be built in. So as we minister to these people, as we minister to the young men and women off the streets that we had to feed, first, we just sent out let's check them out, see how many of these young men and women out there who are on drugs, if they even have a decent hot meal once a week. That was the first question we had.
Hmm.
And we were looking for 50 to 60 to 100. We started feeding 500. We still feed them today,
Hmm.
but we had to feed them and treat them with dignity. So there wasn't any compassion. You just throw the food at them. In fact, it wouldn't matter what you cook, whatever you cook. These quote unquote these people can do it. In fact, so what we did, what I did was we required the folks in the kitchen who were cooking to cook the food as if they were cooking it for me. So there were times when I had to sit down amongst these guys, and sometimes we still do, and eat the food with them. So they see that
Hmm.
the food, the quality of the food was good for me, it was also good for them. Other than that, then there's no compassion. It's just structure. We treat them like trash. We say we're ministering to them, but we really don't respect them.
Hmm.
And that doesn't go a long way. Soon, that's a facade that even though people at that level see through quickly, and they stop coming, or they come because they're hungry, they need the food, but it means nothing and makes no difference.
Hmm. And mingling with them, helping them in every way. They might need emotional support, psychological support, physiological support, and you just want someone to be there. The homeless. Now that kind of a ministry taught you, I believe, taught you a lot, and you learn about people that you dealt with or that you continue to deal with. Um, do you see Christ in those people? Uh, as compared to how society ignore those kind of those people who don't have.
You have to see Christ again. If you don't, there's no compassion. The structure is there, but there's no compassion, and it becomes rot. So they just come because they want the food, uh, and because the goal of doing those kinds of ministry, or at least particular that particular kind of ministry, is redemption.
Mm-hmm.
So you want people's lives changed, then realize that God can change their lives, and some of them already know God, have accepted Christ, but they fell on hard times. Uh, so if they can begin to see that this program being driven by the love of God, I think it helps propel or accelerate the process of redemption. So you have to. If not, don't do it. Just go to the food somewhere and send them there to get fed. If you're going to do it at the church, and it's a church driven ministry, then it has to be built on compassion so that you see them. So we say to them, one of the sort of mantra that they repeat, I am somebody. You know,
Hmm.
they have to realize that there's somebody that created in the image of God. And maybe they're no different from us. Maybe they're a little messy in the dress and we just clean up, but we all messed up the same way. So So we help them realize that,
Yeah.
and the transformation that comes from this over the years is awesome.
Hmm. And talking about your visionary leadership across faith lines. Now, you helped establish Devo's Village with a medical center, school, IT center, housing, and an Ebola orphans home.
Yeah.
What did that project teach you about working across faith lines, including Muslims and others?
Wow. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, there's a whole lot, but I would say it taught me that vision grows when it makes room for others. We did not begin by asking what divides us, but by asking what the community needed. So uh, we had one of our church members that live out there who came by the church one time, in fact, several occasions, and told us about the place. It's heavily 89% Muslim, but there are needs that are there. You know, we started out with the need for education and healthcare. Okay, and we I went and met the chiefs and elders, and they told us about the need. And I said, well, you know, you got land. If we can look around and pray, and God provides
Mm-hmm.
uh, financial resources. They said, well, if you do that, we give you 25 acres of land. We own 25 acres of land there right now. So um, both Muslims, Christians, international partner, we all work side by side uh, because suffering does not ask about doctrine. Visionary leadership listens
Mm-hmm.
deeply and it builds trust patiently and welcomes cooperation without fear. So, over the last, what, 10 years now, we've grown a church there. We didn't build a church building, put up a cross and all of that. I
Mm-hmm.
just thought that was going to create a more acrimonious atmosphere that were gotten in the way of actually what we were trying to do. So our intention was redemption, making sure people knew Christ. But we built a school, we built a hospital, and the school had a big auditorium. Eventually, that became our church, and today we maybe have 150, 200. So people, even if we only have one person who accepted Christ up to date, we made
Mm-hmm.
an impact. So we just brought those two things together, and the Muslims in the community saw us coming around talking about the needs and how we could work together. We're not concerned about uh, who they were, so that it shifts how we treated them. We were treating them because they were also our neighbors.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of a work it requires trust and cooperation. Were
Yeah.
there any leadership challenges that came up because bringing people together, diverse group of people together around a common or share humanitarian purpose, you might have experienced certain things that you were able to overcome. Would you mind sharing with us any challenges in bringing those groups,
Well,
variety of groups together?
the biggest challenge was just making sure that we included the leaders and young leaders in the community in what we were doing. That even if we had some experts in town at the church, if we found some of those experts in that community, then the challenge was to put those experts in the community in partnership with the experts that we had. But again, there was also a challenge because sometimes even as church people we are so myopic. We only see the shadows. We don't see
Mm-hmm.
the depth. So this is a church work. So let's employ more church people. So those kinds of challenges are always simmering somewhere around. So how do we deal with it to say, yes, but we got experts in town at the church, but there are also experts in the community that we're trying to do this for. So you either employ those or we bring both of them together to work together. And I think that helped. Yeah, but you always find those kinds of challenges because the sense of ownership, we own it. So let's benefit from
Mm-hmm.
it most of the time, or if not all of the time.
Wow. And then it's about, building systems that last or that can be sustained and not just building buildings. and you must have learned a whole lot that you're sharing with us here. But when it comes to entrepreneurship as witness and poverty alleviation, we hear about Lead Incorporated, LEAD Incorporated, now serves thousands of macro and small business owners across multiple Liberian counties. How did you cast a leadership vision that connects entrepreneurship, poverty alleviation, and gospel witness in such a tangible way?
So you're doing ministry in the context in a time where people are starting to look for jobs.
Hmm.
People who are small business owners, micro business owners, who have some expertise to make you slippers,
Hmm.
sell something on the side of the street, just need some empowerment. So I spoke with the church that I work with in Grand Rapids. They have a program called Partners Worldwide, and the goal of that program is to empower Christian business owners uh, to grow the business through micro microfinance and microfinance programs, small loans.
Hmm.
So we introduced that program in a time when people needed it the most. Um, and that has grown with its own challenges. When Ebola came, it's kind of almost sank the program because, of
Hmm.
course, Ebola just messed up everything. People lost their profits. They had to survive, and some people who took loans died. And so after Ebola, and then some challenges with COVID, we've started the program again. We're still doing on a lower uh, scale, uh, mostly local now. We do it with whatever with some of the money that we had left, uh, at a very very low scale, but we still do it. So people are
Hmm.
still benefiting from it. So how do you frame business with dignity and not poverty and not profit alone? Profit is important, but you add some dignity to it. How entrepreneurship gives people agency and restores people hope, in the process of all that. So teaching uh, all of that, it creates value and it honors God, and
Hmm.
it helps people serve customers in the community with dignity. So, for example, when a woman grows her market stall and sends her children to school, the gospel becomes visible. That's how the gospel lives itself out through that particular ministry, through that particular family. How economic empowerment becomes a form of discipleship.
Wow. And if you're just joining us, this is the Gracious Hope Podcast. And our special guest here today is the senior pastor of the Historic Providence Baptist Church in Liberia, Reverend Dr. Samuel B. Reeves Jr. And we are talking about his servant leadership, a life of a servant leader. And he has been involving ministry activities that empower not just the church and its leaders, but also the community and the public in general. We'll be right back. Let us take a break. We'll be right back. And hey, hit that share button so that your friends and your relatives and your loved ones and your groups can get a copy of this broadcast as well. We will be right back. Don't go away. We'll be right back. All right, and we are back here with you on the podcast. And if you're just joining us, this is a Gracious Hope podcast, and of course, we are talking about a life of a servant leader. Okay, so now let us get to the understanding here about community activities. Now, there are some Christians who only think of ministry as preaching every Sunday, and that's how they think about ministry, just preaching. But you have shown that leadership can empower livelihoods too. What convinced you that economic empowerment is part of national healing?
Wow. We call to proclaim is holistic. It has to meet the needs of the whole person. It has to. And the church also has a role in that. So that thing we call to proclaim the gospel is not just the preaching on Sunday morning. Um, is it's the preaching that makes a redemptive difference
Yeah.
where people are and meet their needs where they are. So the church must find again. I think those three questions got to be important. Has to be important for all of us wherever we minister. Who are we? Why are we? Where are we? If we realize those, we and answer those questions, it leads us to recognizing the totality of what we call to do. What I like to always couch as saying the holistic gospel that meets the mind, body, and soul.
Hmm.
So economic empowerment, justice issues, all of the like, so that people can see that that's why the gospel exists.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it goes back to the whole thing about being a pastor, being a leader, and working with people both in the church, its structure, its system, and also reaching out in the communities uh, that need the church more. The question becomes, how do you keep the gospel of Christ central while working in spaces that also involve policy making, funding, and business?
Yeah, I mean, you again, that you have to be centered in your relationship with God, so that the issue of integrity serves as a foundation.
Hmm.
So that what you're doing is that it continues to be redemptive on all levels, so that you are an example. In Scripture we say, so it said, follow me as I follow Christ. Not perfect, so it doesn't mean there won't be the errors, but people see that the greatest efforts are being made
Hmm.
in the area of integrity, so that people can believe that there's a redemptive difference here as opposed to the other places that they go for what they need. And I think that encourages people to continue to hold on to the gospel and to
Hmm.
the church and to the gospel of Jesus that you are proclaiming through through those different ministries that you're called to do.
Hmm. And when it comes to national leadership roles and public responsibility, I mean, you are being elected to lead bodies such as the Liberia Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention and the Liberia Council of Churches. Now, what do these roles reveal about the kind of spiritual and moral leadership our country is asking from you?
I think if you look, if you look long enough, you realize that for me they reveal a hunger for leadership, and leadership that is credible
Hmm.
before it is charismatic. So it's easy to get caught up in the charisma of ministry, but one that is credible. People need to be led, and they're clamoring for it. And if they can find credible leadership, they run after it. And so sometimes people ask me the question, how come you are president of this and president of that? I say, well, I don't go looking for it. For sure don't go looking for it. It comes looking for me. And so I have to ask myself, am I able to provide credible leadership then yes, then that means that means that's a yes for me, and that allows me to go and empower other people so that these institutions are better off,
Hmm.
because it's about managing people. Uh, um, so just like the nation, I believe Liberia is asking for leaders who speak truth without hatred and unity without compromise. And that's sometimes the challenge there. We either we get caught up on one of those sides, and we most times get caught up on the wrong side. So these roles, they are not focused on positions, but I think they ought to be focused on building trust.
Hmm.
And they signal a desire for moral clarity in a confusing time, in a difficult time, where it's easy uh, to take what's not yours because I need to survive,
Hmm.
you know. But the issue of moral clarity must be at the forefront and center of what's there to do.
And, what is the weight of being in rooms where church, society, and national direction meet? I mean, how do you remain grounded when you find yourself in
I
rooms
think it's a
of church,
privilege
society, and national direction when they're all
place
meeting?
to be. I think it's a privileged place to be because, again, if you're centered and grounded and know what your calling is, and that's not an ambition, you can put forth that calling, and that calling can energize. Uh, uh, that calling can get people to see a greater sense of what is being called to do. That's
Hmm.
bigger than those of us in the room, because outside of that calling, where it's just an ambition, then we become petty and uh, myopic. But if there's a sense of calling that's broader for the greater good, then it's easier. Nothing is easy. I like to say it's easier to put forth that sense of calling on the floor, and hopefully inspire people to see beyond themselves for what God has called them to do in whatever particular
Wow.
area.
But how do you? I'm wondering, how do you keep your convictions clear when everyone wants you to choose a side?
Because you've been grounded first. That's I guess I say easier. We're human, so the challenge is also always there. But you always go back to your center. Why? The why. Why am I here? Why did God call me here? And so sometimes people just need that one person in there that stands out
Hmm.
to bring them back to the center. And if you're not, then everybody then no, then it's the hurricane hits the room, hits the house, and we all get caught up in the rubble. So sometimes
Hmm.
it's just that one person that stands out, and sometimes stands up and say, "This is what I believe." That calls the group back, the calls the group back to center. It's not always easy, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's just that one person that is needed to do that.
Hmm. And talking about peace, we're talking about reconciliation and confronting the past. Now, as president of Liberia, the Liberia Council of Churches, LCC, you have pushed for peace, you have pushed for reconciliation, you have pushed for national healing. What have been your most significant leadership challenges in calling church and state to confront Liberia's painful past in an honest way?
I think I mean, that's always a challenge. That always, and I think I believe that the greatest challenge has been resisting what I like to call selective memory. You know, healing requires truth, and truth is always uncomfortable. So some people prefer silence over confession,
Mhm.
and stability over justice. So we
Mhm.
need to be stable. So
Yeah.
if we say everything that happened, it might cause some instability, you know, so we don't do justice. Sometimes I've had to insist that reconciliation without honesty is only postponing the inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
And then courage means holding peace or holding space
Yeah.
for limited, for lament rather. So you hold space for lament while guiding the nation towards hope. So you got to hold all those tensions in I mean constant. You got to hold them together because you need them. They sometimes it looks like an oxymoron, but you kind of need them in tension. Yeah.
Hmm. Wow. And there's healing that comes from truth, but truth can reopen wounds if it is not handled properly with wisdom. How
Right.
do you speak truth? How do you speak truth and still lead people toward peace?
And that's the important part. That's why others is, yes, I think you can. So if you have the right kind of people there with wisdom, some of the elders, some people who have had experiences, and then also relying on other systems from other parts of the world, the Rwanda experience, the South African experience, and bringing in some, people who can help you understand that it helps. Yeah.
Mhm.
But you need both. You need both. You have to have to tell the truth and do it in a way that doesn't destroy everything, but sets you on a course to say, since we know this truth, we will not
Mhm.
repeat it.
Hmm. And you have spoken to a lot of leaders, you have spoken to politicians, or politicians have spoken to you, have conversation with you. Some of them are members of your church, and your church is diverse people from all sectors of our country. You've been dealing with them. And recently, I believe it's in January, the beginning of session of the National Legislature, they had the first session at the Historic Providence Baptist Church you pastor. Now, it was historic and it was also a reflection of our country's national history and conscience. Now, when it comes to dealing with public officials and other people, what do you say to leaders who want reconciliation without repentance and unity without justice?
So that's why I say you have to hold things in, hold the tensions together, because people always would choose selective, and I spoke about selective memory.
Mm-hmm.
Some people want this, other people want this, and sometimes, and I think most times it's not an either or, it's a both and situation that we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So the truth over here, you know, and justice over here, we have to hold them in tension so that we can learn from both. Again, it's not always easy, but because to deny one side is only building the house with half of what it requires. So you need both, and it's not always sometimes palatable, but
Mm-hmm.
but we still need it, even though it's
Yeah.
not, and we need to hold them in tension and learn to live with the challenges of of holding them in tension.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about mentorship, scholarships, and theological education. You have mentored pastors, created scholarship pathways, and established internship links with institutions like Princeton Theological Seminary. What do you see leadership development and theological education as central to
Oh,
Liberia's future?
it's a little crack in the. Yep. So a nation, any institution rises and falls on the quality of its leaders. So theology shapes our conscience, and leadership shapes our culture.
Hmm.
So when as pastors, when we think deeply, we lead wisely, and when we form well, uh, institutions will endure. So, the education uh, multiplies the impact beyond one lifetime. So, the challenge of trying to invest in leaders, because they become the answers to prayers that you know, we have perhaps prayers answers now that we have down the road, and also the importance of um, preparing for the future. So making sure there's a succession after this
Mm-hmm.
session. There's a succession after this session, and that succession must be led by qualified leaders. So you have to do what you can, sacrifice some things to create an environment so that really you leave the institution better off than you met it.
Hmm. And so, looking at our country, Liberia, right now, what happens to our country when leaders have the authority but lack spiritual formation? And what happens when a church has passion but lacks grounding?
Wow. That's again, that's half of what the house needs to half of what the house needs to build. So you need both. You need leaders. That's why again you need well trained, qualified leaders, both in the state and in the church. And if the church
Mm-hmm.
can lead the way, then that's good, so that you're training pastors. For example, I think we're doing a little better now nationally. I don't even know what the percentages are in terms of psychiatrists, sociologists, but a well-trained pastor is one who is able to deal with some of those issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine, and I can recall, maybe less so now, but the first few years I was here, I know I played the role not just a pastor. I was a sociologist, some psychologist, some uh, psychiatry, and you have to play all those roles because
Mm-hmm.
because of the kinds of challenges that people uh, brought to you. And so so training qualified, well trained leaders on all fronts are important to helping the church, helping society become the kind of society that we need to develop the nation that we need at all levels.
Hmm. Okay. And we're almost wrapping up here, but I also wanted to know or ask for the benefit of our listeners, your preaching, your writing often insists that leaders must resist corruption, they must resist tribalism and patronage. Can you share a moment when you had to take a costly stand for your integrity as a Christian leader in Liberia's public square?
Ah, there are so many, but there were moments. There are moments when silence would have preserved access, but truth demanded risk. So you be quiet, and they will take you in, and you be friends. But when you
Hmm.
speak the truth, or when I spoke the truth, of course there will be some people who don't call you their friends anymore. But that's a choice you have to make for the greater good. So you you choose to speak against practices that benefited powerful interests and lost opportunities as a result. So those are some of the risks that you take. Again, I always say the risk must be for the greater good of the greater number.
Hmm.
So that's why integrity always, but it pays in credibility. Integrity
Hmm.
costs something, but it pays in credibility. In the long run, credibility is most important. So your integrity costs you that, but in the long run, it stays. Uh, so then your leadership uh, will survive compromise that is worth keeping.
Hmm. And looking back over your life journey from local pastor to national church leader and author of books, including the one we just talked about, Surveying the Leadership Landscape, what do you consider your most meaningful leadership achievement, and how has God surprised you along the way?
Oh wow. Uh, I almost like people to say that to me, but sometimes you have to deal with it yourself. So I would say my greatest achievement is not the institution that I built or the titles that people call, but the leaders who now serve with encourage and clarity, so that sense of leadership and service with courage and clarity that comes out of this for me is the greatest. I would say the greatest, my greatest achievement. So God surprised me by using my limitations
Hmm.
as tools rather than as obstacles. So you come in, you have some limitations, and sometimes you have a whole lot. And but God is gracious, and He puts you in an environment that you learn and you get better. But there's still with those limitations that God used them, and God doesn't use them as obstacles, but He used them as tools.
Hmm.
So I expected impact through strength, but discover it through obedience. So you come back here, everybody say, you know all the book, so to speak. And in my case, I came back to a church where almost all the leaders were people who helped to raise me, who saw me in diapers, you know, and I said, sort of say it when I'm talking about that. It reminds me of my grandmother. I was raised by my
Hmm.
grandmother. I was raised by my grandmother. I don't know how to disrespect old people. When I got here, they were all old people who were in charge. So with all the book, quote unquote, that I knew, I saw my grandmother sitting there, and I was serving as the leader of my grandmothers, so to speak. So it had to be out of obedience and not out of strength, where I had to remind them, don't you know who the leader is? Don't you know I went to this school and I got this degree? I had to say, because I wouldn't say that to my grandmother. I would never say that to my grandmother. She'd kill me before I even die. So it had to come not through strength, but through obedience. I had to see them and obey them and treat them with respect. And then they soon gave me what I was asking for to make the
Hmm.
necessary transformation at the Historic Providence Baptist Church. So the joining taught me that faithfulness leaves footprints long after success fades.
Okay. And then the last two questions I just asked both together, and that will be the two last questions. Now, if you could look back and speak to the younger Dr. Reeves right now, right at the beginning of his assignment as a pastor, what will you tell that younger Dr. Reeves to hold on to when the work gets heavy? And the second question is, what do you believe God is calling our country's next generation of leaders to become? Not just to do, but to become.
Oh wow! I would say to the younger Dr. Reeves, be a little more patient. You know, God has a plan, and God's plan always is effectuated. Always, it never is not. So, be a little more patient, but learn a little more also from the older people around you, because I think the older Dr. Reeves now uh, has gotten where he's gotten because of that mentorship from his grandmother. And if I had stayed home a little more, learned a little more, I got a lot to tell you, but if I gotten a little more added to that lot, it will put me in a better position. So you can't get but better for it, you know. So the younger generation in the future, look, integrity must be the most important thing for you. It must be the most important thing. It must be the most important thing. Because I think, um, because down the road, I think, like I said earlier, you will find out that your faithfulness to what God has called you to will leave more and greater, more impactful
Mm-hmm.
footprints long after you're gone. The other things are just minutia. They're here, they're gone tomorrow. Nobody remembers them. And sometimes the up front it look like the huge, biggest stuff. But
Hmm.
what integrity with helps you to become faithful to the calling that you received way back then when you try to lead, when you went about leading yourself, like Nehemiah, and was sure of the God that had called you. You were in tune with that God. You were made sure you were being shaped by that call from that God, and that will take you the rest of the journey. So put that first. The other things will come and
Mm-hmm.
go. Be
Hmm.
rooted. Be rooted in your faith. Courageous in your in your truth. Cultivating your leadership that serves the common good and leads the nation and or your organization wherever you find yourselves better than you found it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Reeves, for sharing your life, your convictions, and your labor with us on the podcast. Your story teaches us that leadership is not just about performance, but leadership is stewardship. And it is what you do with what God places in your hands. And to our
Already some
listeners, yes, to our listeners, um, here's a question I want to leave with you. Are you chasing the title or are you answering a burden that God lays on your heart? Because God may not call you to a platform, but He will call you to responsibility. And if this conversation challenged you, share it with a pastor, a public servant, a student leader, a friend who has lost faith in leadership. So let us keep raising the standard, not with noise, but with character and service. I am Pastor Red, and this is the Gracious Hope Podcast. Any final word, Reverend Reeves, before we leave?
Well, no, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope we reach out to somebody who has some answers that we try to, some questions that we try to answer, and to help make sure the walk with God, the call to ministry, and the call to whatever they find themselves in is one that will make a redemptive difference wherever they are. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.